The 79 series definitely lends itself to customization. We just got back from Cape York and I feel it does need a few more things just to finish off the build. And when I say need, I mean that very lightly. These are all wants, I know that.
What have you done?
Oh my God. It's awkward and it's painful. What? We do have a 100 amp DC charger in the ute and also one in our CONQUEROR camper. So trying to use those chargers to their full potential is very hard with the standard alternator. So we do have a 220 amp upgraded alternator to install into this. So we're going to run through how that goes. They're known to be in a pain in the ass spot. So we're also going to be fitting an Ironman Bullbar with full hoops, side rails and side steps. And we have actually already modified those items straight out of the box, getting them re-powder coated straight away in a really heavy textured pro texture coating, which I really love. Matches the tray and just gives it a bit extra protection. So it's one of those things I really like the look of. I love the look of the Ironman bar with the full hoops. It sits a bit higher. It harks back and sort of looks like a modern style farm gate bull bar they used to put on the old 40 series and things like that. I think it looks really cool. Anyway, we'll get in and start stripping the front end down. Have a look at how hard this alternator is going to be to get in there, and we'll work this out together. Let's get into it. Righto, we'll get in and disconnect the battery first, because obviously we're working on the alternator, plus the winch is going to have to come out. So I do have a winch installed into the factory bumper here that I made a winch cradle up for. So we're going to do away with that, which is a bit sad, because I did like the look of the vehicle just with the bumper. But it's a progression with four-wheel drives. We just keep modifying them. Well, I do anyway. So we'd already removed the side steps previously, ready for the recoating to match the bull bar and the tray in the Pro Texture textured powder coat look. So all the bar work and the tray is matching. So not long been back from the Cape York trip, there were some other maintenance issues we first had to sort out. One of those being wheel bearings, and it definitely needed doing with both rear axle seals absolutely cooked. So the very first wheel bearing we're about to do here, and I really wasn't going to cover this, but it's probably important to note, it won't take much to clean the grease out of the hub, because there is none. So that means rear axle seal has been leaking, and washes all the grease out with the oil from the rear diff housing, which was evident as soon as I cracked that axle. Oil dripped out, so I'd say the other side's going to be the same. Rear axle seals are pretty common. I've got to do one in the 40 series at the moment. You can see it's weeping as well, but yeah, the bearings don't go so well just in oil. I mean, it's still being lubricated to some degree, and it obviously made it all the way home. But yeah, won't take much to wash the hub out because there's no grease in there. Not only did we do that, I also obviously give the car a really good clean, but we took the rear mud guards off the tray and Rapti-coated the front edge. With the wheel offset just poking ever so slightly out of the front guard, it really throws some rocks back at the front edge of those guards on the tray. So it was good to tidy them up as well, and it's just about getting the car back into tip-top shape after such a big trip. Disconnect the useless shitty bit of technology that's in the front of your Landcruiser, the sensor. A lot of bull bars you do need to relocate that, pretty sure, and I haven't read the instructions yet, but I'm 99% sure with the Ironman you don't. Remember, I'm not a mechanic, so if you're not confident to remove that sensor, don't. I have worked on these vehicles before and have removed them, plugged them back in. If you don't move the position of them and you don't turn the ignition of the vehicle on, especially with the battery disconnected, 99% chance you'll be right. Just remember, I'm not a mechanic. This is me doing it, and if it works, I'll show you it works. If I have dramas, I'll show you I have dramas. So it's much easier to disconnect the front bumper once you remember to disconnect the fog lights as well. Hot tip, that one. We've got little clips that go into these ends of the fascia here, and you can see how close it is to the face, and it's a really difficult spot with the headlight. So I'll show you how the clips work with a pick tool, and it can be done. So you've got these square little clips. I have a little tab on each side on the horizontal, and you've got to get down from the top and push those tabs in to release the bottom and the top of that fascia. It's not easy, but it can be done. Moving that Rio and the bumper on a Landcruiser, and probably most 4x4s, does remove a fair bit of weight. So although adding Bullbar does add extra weight, it's not always as much as what you think. Also worth noting is when you're removing heaps of weight off the front of your vehicle, be sure that the arse end of the vehicle isn't then much heavier that it falls off the hoist. That is a hot tip, and keeping it down low to the ground while you do it is probably a good idea, because these things do get very rear heavy. With all the hardware that come with the Bullbar laid out neatly, it was time to start the install. First job is to actually install the winch cradle straight onto the end of the chassis. It sits over the top. So I'm just going to go and centralise it side to side and up and down, put it sort of in the middle of its location, I suppose. So these are the packing plates that we just fitted. I've fitted one on each side of the end of the chassis rail on both sides, and I fitted 2 of these plates to the top of the chassis rail and 1 underneath. If that helps you, great. I'd say every vehicle is going to be a little bit different, but that is pretty well centered, and 1 plate higher to lift the cradle up rather than 1 plate lower. Now, as you can see in my hand, that is a Sandy Torp recovery point to match my Sandy Torp Landcruiser. That is a powder coat product. That is not 2-packed. And this goes along with what I said at the start of the episode, that we have already modified this brand new Bullbar and had it recoated. But while we're in there, I thought, why not just add a bit of bling? Because let's be honest, we're not going to use a recovery point that often. We're not hardcore four-wheelers. We're about touring, and they're about getting out of trouble when you need them. So I think it'll look good, and it'll just add something a little bit special to the car. So you actually need to use the same bolts that bolt the recovery point on, actually hold the winch cradle on as well. So we've done 1 bolt up on each side of the cradle fairly tight. Now we're going to do some diagonal measurements. It does say this in the instructions. Look, this is going to be fairly subjective, I think. Like, yes, we should get this centered to the car body, but then the Bullbar may not be exactly made to shape either. Like, they are robotically welded, I did notice, so it should be pretty damn good in a jig. But it's worth doing anyway, because if we can get away with just doing this once, that'll be fantastic. So we'll pick a spot, the same on each side. If we hook over that bit of plastic, we've got 988. It's 988. That, honestly, hang on, is that right? Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't think it'd be that good. So check that on a few points, because if that is right, that's quite simple to do. Literally the Bullbar slips on that if you weren't doing a winch. We have to obviously put the winch in, but that's not too hard. So yeah, it's a pretty simple process really. Right, with the winch cradle tight, it's time to start thinking about the winch. So we've got a Carbon Scout Pro 12,000 pound winch that we had in the bar previously. We have had to rotate the gearbox so the free spool lever is facing forward as per how the Bullbar is set up. One thing we are really going to have to think about is where we mount the winch controller, or isolator box I should say. Being that the Cruiser has the radar or the anti-crash sensor in the grille, and this Bullbar doesn't actually require you to move that, means you can't put that box in the center on the top of the Bullbar in a traditional mounting position. It is going to be probably a relocation to underneath the bonnet, which definitely adds some complexity to the install. But it probably is a better place for it to live anyway. It's drier, it's warmer, it's less likely to be tampered with if your car's sitting on the side of the road parked overnight. So a little bit more work, but we're probably going to have to put it under the bonnet, I would say at this point, but we'll see how we go. Rightio, got busy over the weekend with a couple of beers, and we made a custom bracket to mount the isolator box in behind the grille. It's right off to one side, so it doesn't block the radiator much more than what it would if it was sitting up in the middle in a normal position as such. So that works really well. The factory wiring from the isolator runs down. It's not rubbing on anything. It's solid. And then if that ever fails one day, which your isolator usually is your weak point of any winch, It's a matter of popping the grill out. It's 3 bolts, they're all factory hole locations, and we can replace that. So now we'll get in and fit the cube lights into the Bullbar, ready for the Bullbar to actually go on, and most of the hard bits are done now. Right, so instead of battling in behind to get this patch harness in, we'll just remove the blinker lens, which will give us access to the wiring there. We're actually going to take the front headlight out. It's only 4 10mm bolts. Plug the patch harness in, and then I'll show you, we'll make sure we leave the adapter plug for the trigger for the spotlights when they ever go on. It's easily accessible. And we'll take that off, sit that up out of the road, and we'll pull the headlight out. Now, it's quite intuitive where they go. They can only go in one place. It goes in between the headlight and harness, rather the headlight and harness and the blinker and the harness, and then goes down to your fog light. And then this is a spare one that the passenger side loom doesn't have. This is for adding spotlights later. That's your trigger that would go into your relay. So that's all pre-wired in. It takes the trigger off your high beam. So pretty handy little addition that. So pull these out, put this in between. So just make sure you leave this up high somewhere in the engine bay that is accessible for later on. This is the factory fog light harness out of the plastic bumper. So we are actually going to cut the factory plugs off the end of that, solder in the Ironman plug, and then that harness can plug back into its factory location. That's pretty easy. There could be a patch harness for this. I don't have one, so that's what we're going to do, and it's really not a hard job. So we got the Ironman cube light end soldered into the factory harness for the fog lights. That can plug back into its factory plug, like that. And we'll just let that hang all down, put the Bullbar on, we'll plug it in, put it up on the hoist and zip tie it up. Nice and neat, where we know where it's got to go. Righto, we've finally got all the lights in. It is pretty fiddly install, this one. The little nuts and washers that hold the rubber overriders on the other side. James, you had a good idea just to put some black Sikaflex or a bit of silicone or anything just to stop those nuts coming undone, because they're going into a molded into rubber. You can't really do them up super tight. When we took those off to get the bar powder coated, we did notice they were quite loose, so I put a bit of Sikaflex on the back of those, stop them coming undone. Certainly takes a bit of mucking around to get into the right location. There's a lot of adjustment in and out and up and down on the bar itself. Once you're happy with it, put the car back down on the ground and make sure it's still in the right spot once it's sitting under its own weight. Don't forget to install the pin bolts that you have to drill through the winch cradle. It's a very crucial part of the install and stops the bull bar moving around. So we've got the cruiser right up in the air. Next job we're going to tackle is the high output alternator. So this is an OEX unit, comes with a wiring harness to upgrade the factory wiring going from the alternator to the battery, and is rated at 220 amps. Obviously supplied through all 4x4 spares, delivered to my door. It's quite a cost-effective mod, around $700 or $800. When you think about all the money you spend on lithium batteries and chargers, to be able to have a car that is capable to put out enough 12-volt power to utilize those chargers seems like a no-brainer at this day and age. So the alternator is one of those things that is becoming a worthwhile modification. So we're going to see how difficult these things are to replace. It doesn't look that bad. I get what they're saying on the side of the track. This would be a bit of a pain, but with a hoist, I don't think it's going to be too bad. Sort of DIY job to tackle. Let's see how we go. And the top bolts suck. Starting to see why it's hard. Oh my God. Okay, all the bolts are out, all the plugs are undone. That's been about 10 minutes. They are a bit awkward to get to. but I think the challenge is about to begin, trying to get it out. Looks like a real bastard actually. So there we go. All right, there's actually 5 bolts that hold the alternator in. That seems excessive. And that top one is not fun. Oh my God. That's so stupid. Why would they design it like that? Oh my God. Woo, it's out. You just gotta hold your tongue right. True. Over there. Oh, come over there. Yeah, through there. Yes. So the OEX unit is physically a lot bigger, which I was really worried about getting it back into the position. But surprisingly, it slotted back in pretty easy. And all in all, the job really wasn't too bad to do. I was quite pleasantly surprised about that. Right, so the OEX kit does come with a separate wiring harness. So the factory wiring harness coming down to the alternator, you need to zip tie away safely and heat shrink properly and isolate, because that is still live power from the battery. And use the wiring harness that is supplied. Has a 225 amp fuse. It is a 220 amp alternator. Runs straight up along with the factory harness. So I'll just follow it back to the battery, and it really is not that hard to get in and out. I was very surprised. We followed the factory wiring across in front of the motor, down, and then we've sat the fuse, or the extra fuse that they give you, just on top of the little fuse box beside the fuel filter. It's easy enough to move if you ever want to get to that fuse box. Nice and neat, not rubbing on anything. We've got the Oricom aerial now mounted on the Bullbar as well. I'll run that cable in ready for when we do the install on the actual UHF. I've had that for a long time, I just never ever had anywhere to put it. These little vents that suck air up into the intercooler on this new shape 79, I had to trim down to make them shorter, so that's that side. That's what they normally look like. Because of that winch isolator, we had to cut it a bit shorter. Funnily enough though, the winch isolator itself is basically the same shape. So not only does that winch isolator not really block the radiator any more than it already was because of those ducts, it actually is the same shape to push air up into that bonnet, so that worked really well. Awesome, sort of the final touch is a decent awning. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. Anyway, let's get it out of the shed and have a really good look at it, how it looks with the Bullbar. We'll set this awning up too and see how that works. I'm really happy with how it turned out. Okay, so for the first nice little touch, I think, which I haven't seen any other awning do, is this little triangle piece that just slides in and out, as you can see. So we don't have to have it here, because if you're not using it, it looks untidy, so you get rid of it. But it's designed to give you that bit of extra cover, stop the weather coming in between the car and the awning. If you're truly camping out of a 270 awning and a swag setup, this just gives you that bit better weather break, I suppose. Especially if you're going to start adding walls to it. Okay, so like I said at the start, the awnings are freestanding until it gets really windy, or everyone has a different level of wind, but regardless, I think if you go to bed overnight, no matter how the awning is designed, you still really need to put legs down and rope them down, because you just don't know how bad that weather's going to get. So the fact that it is pretty light still, the other thing you can do is unclip the legs, which I think is just a nice little clever touch. If the leg gets damaged, or if you truly just want to use it as a freestanding awning and take the risk down the beach, you can just leave those at home. It makes the awning that little bit lighter again. It's a nice clever touch. Once you have deployed those legs or remove them, depending on how you're going to set up, They're integrated lights into the awning now, which a lot of them are starting to do, and it's also just such a function thing if you're going to really camp out of it. You got a little plug here, plug them in, into your power source. Everyone's usually got a massive power source these days, and away you go. That's another thing you don't have to think about when you're setting up for camp, is just the lighting. The lighting's already done. The canvas is sort of a middle ground as well. It's not super heavy, it's not super light. The heavier canvas is obviously stronger, but then once it's wet, it's really heavy. So you do want a sort of an in-between ground that's still strong enough, but light enough that it doesn't weigh your car down. So just to be clear, all the parts we've installed in this episode are supplied through all 4x4 Spares. They're certainly not all free. They do help me out, however, being sponsors. And I've picked all these items for my personal preference, including the awning. Darche is not one of our sponsors. I just like the brand. They've been around for a very long time. We've used Darche for a very long time ourselves, and I do know a couple of the guys from Darche, and they're just good guys to deal with. So the warranty's going to be there, the parts are going to be there for a long time. Long-term testing of that Alternator will come. Make sure you follow along on STS Garage and our other channel, Smart Touring Systems, where we do all of our travel content. Anyway, head over to smarttouringsystems.com.au. Don't forget, we've got heaps of cool merch. The Starlink mini mounts have been super popular, so grab one of those too. Best thing you can do for camping is to have a Starlink mini, not for TV, but for safety. I think it's a great replacement for a sat phone, so we're loving that as well. Enough from me. Don't forget, you only live once. Get out in the shed, get into that project. I'll see you next time.